right? You'd have one person go away, do the work. God knows how long it would take, having to research, look at best practices, look at all your data. By using our internal teammate who understands our history, our background, our message, all the details about us, sat collaboratively in our channel, so working through it together, the speed to outcome is phenomenal compared to what would previously have been, I don't know, a week or maybe even more's work. You're getting that done within 24, 48 hours.
To succeed and thrive at C-suite level, you need strategic clarity and operational excellence. Hello and welcome back to the C-Suite Framework podcast. If you are thinking, it's been a little bit quiet around here for a while, you would be correct in thinking that, but I promise I have a very good reason. I have been deep in the throes of getting ready to publish book number 6 in the C-Suite Framework. It's going to be How to Be a Chief Compliance Officer, co-written with Natalie McManus, who is a fabulous Chief Compliance Officer and an even better writer, in my opinion. So that book is due to be coming out probably around the end of April. If you have Chief Compliance Officers in your life, if you are interested in that as a topic, please do message me either on LinkedIn or via email, and I would love to hear from you. And there may even be some early advance copies for interested people. So you can find me at jennifer@coo-author.com or on LinkedIn. We are building the launch team. We're getting ready to get this thing on the road, and it's going to be a super launch. However, I also had too good an opportunity to do a podcast with someone that I've wanted to have on the show for a long time. He's become a long time friend and colleague. His name is Greg Coleshill. And this is a fascinating discussion. Greg worked for 20 years in the people business, in recruitment, in finding the right talent for the right roles, and has taken all of that knowledge and skill set and pivoted into the world of AI and building AI agents and building the right blend of AI agents and people in a new organization. And that conversation today is all about that, his journey, where he is now, and how this organization is approaching this new hybrid workforce. Fascinating. It's going to stay with me for a while. I'm still thinking about some of the things that he said, and hopefully there will be some interesting thoughts in there for you as well. Don't forget to find out more about books, courses, coaching, and all the other things available. Go to www.csuiteframework.com or drop me a message, an email or a LinkedIn message, and I will get back to you. And without further ado, let us cross over and talk to Greg. I am delighted to welcome to the C-Suite Framework podcast, Greg Coleshill. Greg has spent nearly 20 years leading businesses delivering innovative talent solutions to technology and financial services firms. That's recruitment to you and me, enabling customers to solve some of their most complex and high-profile people challenges. He spent 18 years in his previous organization, building a consistent track record of terrific performance and scaling multiple business units. And following his appointment as CEO of that entity, Greg successfully managed the business through an acquisition event and subsequent integration. Today, Greg is the Chief Commercial and Operating Officer at vigilant.ai, and he's taking the lessons learned from 2 decades of managing human capital and applying them to the next frontier of organizational growth. He's here to discuss the shift from hiring seats to onboarding intelligence and how regulated firms can begin to build the hybrid workforce of the future, including safe, governed, and audit-ready AI teammates. Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks for having me on here and thanks for the amazing introduction.
Well, listen, it's a pleasure to have you here and probably overdue. I mean, I should say what the intro didn't say is that you and I have kind of become colleagues and buddies over the years and tracked each other's pivots, career moves, life changes, ups and downs and everything else. And one thing I'm just going to say straight up about you, Greg, and, you know, any recruiters listening to this, you were always the person, you would always take a call, first of all, like whether or not there was something doing, whether, you know, whatever was going on. You looked beyond recruitment, and we had some brilliant, we'll talk about them, maybe like CRO breakfasts and things like that, panels, discussions and all that kind of thing. But one of the things to your eternal credit was you would call me about a role even if it wasn't your mandated role. In other words, even if you had absolutely nothing to gain by it, you might pick up the phone to me and go, hey, Jenny, I saw this. I thought it might be interesting for you. And that sets you apart, in my opinion, from all recruitment agents. So kudos.
Well, you made me blush to start now. So, but thank you. It's really kind. And look, I think it talks to, I don't know how you go about business. I think there's a big thing about do good things happen, right? Business is built on relationships. So that's why we're here today, right? As you say, we won't talk about how long it's been maybe, but we've been in contact for a good while. And yeah, so it's really kind of you to say.
Yeah. And no, I completely agree. And I think those it's moments like that where a relationship goes deeper, goes beyond the transaction at hand, and it speaks to longevity and everything else. But anyway, I'm jumping ahead. First of all, maybe just for the benefit of our listening group, talk to us a little bit more. Obviously, we gave an overview in the bio, but about your career journey and your takeaways from the world of recruitment and how that led to this current role.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I spent some time reflecting on the career journey question before today, and it made me smile, certainly. So, I mean, I've been incredibly lucky. I spent 18 years with what was essentially the same business, whilst at no point feeling like I was standing still. And I think that's pretty unique, and I was very fortunate. So during that time, I was lucky enough to be consistently challenged, learn new things, and really importantly, make some great friends, and not just internal to the business, which is what you see in a lot of jobs, but as you've kind of referenced there, people that were either customers or candidates that I worked with throughout that time that are great friends and people I'll always kind of be in touch with. So I started in the world of recruitment, honestly, as one of the greenest graduates I think you'll ever encounter. I look back and cringe, half laugh, and despite that, I had some great support and was lucky enough, as you've kind of referenced, to have the chance to build a number of business units, support some amazing customers, and work with great colleagues and candidates.
What did you study?
I did business management, which actually was kind of me. One of the best bits of advice I ever received was as a 16 or 17-year-old thinking I wanted to do law because it seemed like great fun arguing in front of a load of people. However, I got a bit of honest advice from a teacher that said, do something you'll really enjoy. You can always do something later, and did do that. And it's been a really good fit and something that actually in the world of degrees and all of that good stuff now I've used lots of.
I don't know. I don't see you as an argumentative type. I see you with a lot of EQ and that kind of thing. I think you probably made the right choices.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, when I say argumentative, let's say debate. That's a nicer word, maybe.
So 18 years and a little bit about the areas that you covered and so on.
Yeah, so we were initially as a technology recruitment business, and as the technology or talent solutions world changed over the years, I think we changed. So we were one of the first movers into the world of data analytics when that really became hot in the kind of, what was that, early 2010s, maybe a little bit before that. And then kind of one of the things I was most proud of was I kind of created the business plan and then grew our risk regulation and compliance business, which is where we met. So supported financial services firms, fintechs, growth businesses to really scale what was a quite challenging area for them and navigate people through that change of what risk and compliance meant for businesses from being the policeman to being the growth enabler.
And that's still so relevant right now. I mean, the CRO network that I work with now, which was founded by the former Lord Mayor of London, Alistair King, is all about growth and growth enablement in the City of London and beyond. So that still resonates today.
Absolutely. I think that area of the world has gone on such a positive journey from the kind of 2007 period, whenever it was, to really being a strategic partner to businesses to enable growth safely.
So I'm going to ask you a question, and you can either answer it now or we can come back to it at the very end, which is advice for graduates now or advice for job hunters now. Do you want to answer that after we've covered the AI element, or?
It's a really interesting one because I was really lucky. I'm not sure I knew what I wanted to do, but I know I didn't. And I was really lucky. I think it's a tough one. I think there's no moving away from the fact that it's a really hard world for graduates at the minute. I think if I'm being frank, a lot of that is put at AI's door. I disagree. I think there's a load of things that have all converged at the same time that do make it a difficult world. So some of the political stuff we've seen is the economic cycle we've been through. There's a price to pay for what happened during COVID in terms of some of the money that was paid out. So we are to some extent where we are. I think that the unique opportunity that graduates have is they're entering the world at a time where they can make the most of AI actually, and can be maybe the force multiplier or whatever the right piece of language is to those businesses. They're not cemented in the previous processes. They've got an opportunity to innovate and really add value.
This is a nice segue, I guess, into the next stage of your career. So 2 decades of working with people, of understanding organizations, understanding, matches, finding all that kind of thing, finding solutions for all of that. Talk to us about what the pivot was. And then obviously, by the way, a very successful M&A moment and that kind of thing, which, we shouldn't take lightly. But talk to us about what the pivot was, what you saw, looking externally, and why you thought this was a place to go.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So as you've rightly referenced, kind of following the acquisition event and dealing with the integration and merger subsequently, my plan had been to, take the summer off with the kids first and foremost, which was absolutely lovely and was brilliant. We were really lucky to be able to do that. But my plan had probably been to start my own recruitment business, but do so slightly differently. I think even prior to finishing, I think I'd seen that the future of work is going to be different than it was previously, that there is going to be a hybrid workforce, that the jobs people did previously will be different. And my plan was to start something that considered AI from first principles. However, sometimes timing's everything, right? And I was introduced by a mutual contact, someone I really trust, introduced and reintroduced. So introduced to Mark, who's one of our co-founders, and reintroduced to Michael, who's the other co-founder, who previously been a customer. So kind of funny how the world turns sometimes. But introduced them just as I was leaving, and it really resonated to me that the opportunity to be on the other side of the fence. So I'd supported loads of businesses from start up to scale up to really kind of grow. The opportunity to be part of that in the space that was really interesting to me was one that felt really aligned. And as you referenced earlier on, in terms of kind of my network and where I'd spent time helping customers across risk, compliance, financial services, that's the area that we're really solving problems for people. And
so to be clear, what we're talking about here is not let's solely hire good people who know how to use AI. This is recognize that there is a hybrid workforce coming. We are going to have AI agents. We are going to have people working alongside AI agents. That requires a different solution. Welcome Vigilant AI.
Absolutely. Not only requires a different solution, but requires a different way of thinking. And we'll touch on this later on, I think. But AI isn't a computer program or software that will deliver an outcome. We're dealing with non-deterministic intelligence. And people have historically, for a long time, managed non-deterministic intelligence in humans. And applying the same principles can really help people drive adoption whilst ensuring the right controls and governance are in place.
Explain non-deterministic for us.
So a computer program will deliver an outcome, same every time. Non-deterministic intelligence, similar to you or I, you might ask me a question now, or a question you just asked me, I'll give you an answer. I'll probably give you 95% the same next time, but there's no way, unless I've practiced it pitch perfect, that you're getting the same answer. So that's what we mean. So very easy to govern and test with deterministic outputs because you know what you're getting. Slightly different, you need different controls, different governance for non-deterministic.
Yeah, and very, very difficult to deal with issues such as explainability when the AI model, as you say, it goes through a fresh process every time. It takes into account a range of variables. It may come up with, a very similar answer. It may come up with something different, but we can't open the black box completely. And that's obviously putting us in a new space.
Exactly. And irrespective of the guardrails and controls and auditability put around things, there is an amount of it's going into a box and coming out with something.
So let's get into it a little bit more now. Let's talk about vigilant.ai and about the approach. And bearing in mind our listenership, we've got COOs, we've got chief risk officers, we've got people aspiring to that leadership role. What are the sorts of things they should be thinking about when they're looking at a hybrid workforce and using AI?
I think it's really difficult for the C-suite at the moment. The macro conditions are, from my perspective, still very tough. And then when you add in what feels like a new crisis or change in economic or political trajectory every few months, it feels really hard to navigate. Then on top of that, boards have been asked, so what about AI? And it's clearly a lot. And then I think one thing that I wasn't necessarily prepared for before being this side of the fence and speaking to as many customers as I have is that the amount of noise that's out there for customers that they've really got to work through, that there's people talking about the benefits generally broadcasting the future, so to speak. There's existing vendors saying that they now do AI. There's new vendors shouting for attention. It's really hard, I think, to make sense of it all and get to, well, actually, how do I realize business benefit? So I think my advice would be remember it's all new. Kind of be a little bit kind to yourself almost, that it is new. It's new for everyone. It's hard. Not believe all the hype. Whilst I do think that the opportunity is clear and significant, I think believing the hype is tough, and simply simplify things where possible. I've spent the last 6 months talking to customers and really importantly, being lucky enough to learn from the guys here who've got vast experience in this space. And it's really clear there are some areas people are struggling with, but it's equally clear there's a real spectrum of progress. So just because you're not at the cutting edge of things, don't think you've lost already. There's absolutely others in similar situations, but getting going and realising some of these challenges and getting ahead of them is important. So I think when I look at the challenges people are seeing, that they boil down to identifying use cases. So where do we need to get started? A lot of people are trying to look at this as a digital transformation, so looking at automation-based work. And I'm not convinced that's the right way, or certainly not the framework that we're encouraging people to apply. There's a clear talent gap that, as I've said, this isn't an upgrade on technology. This is a new concept where we're asking extremely busy operational and functional teams to, in some instances, become prompt engineers or become highly technical in AI, which is really difficult. I think there's this, we kind of touched on it before. There's definitely a safety trap. We've seen some of the ramifications in the industry recently around, well, what can happen if things go wrong, and it can paralyze people. But if you're able to create a safe place for both, or when I say paralyze people, I mean both boards and end users from a concern perspective, that if you're able to create a safe place for people to innovate and adopt AI, then you're kind of halfway there. Kind of moving on to adoption, it's an interesting point, because I think that it's one of the key challenges that chat assistant side of desk that you work with aren't going to get us there. That they're going to maybe help you go a little bit faster. But how do you take the business on the journey? How do you surface how people are innovating? How do you help take not just your real innovators, but how do you take the rest of the business on that journey of adoption and of innovation? And then finally, I think the one that's coming down the line a little bit is that loads of people have kind of begun, or a lot of people have begun, democratization of AI. However, who's governing those agents, or as we talk about teammates, and we'll get onto that, who's keeping them up to date? Who's ensuring they're referencing the latest regulation, for instance? Who's got any provability or auditability around them?
This podcast is brought to you by the best-selling How to Be A range of books. These books, authored by me, Jennifer Geary, in collaboration with other seasoned experts, break down roles such as the COO, Chief Risk Officer, Chief People Officer, and Chief Sustainability Officer into their component parts. They explain the technical capabilities you need, but also how to operate at this level, preparing yourself, getting to know your peers, engaging with culture, strategy, building your team, and much more. Over 30,000 books have been sold, and the books have received overwhelmingly positive reviews. There's even a book about the role of AI called The Augmented COO. Check out the books, available on Amazon and Waterstones now. It sounds like everything from not knowing what to use it for, or using it for the wrong things, not having the talent that you need to do what you need to do, not using it properly or safely, or exposing yourself to problems down the line, and kind of it not truly embedding. And I suppose another way of looking at it, it strikes me that people are either kind of just using a bit of sort of Copilot or GPT or Claude, or saying they're using AI, and sure, there might be some little efficiency gains there and so on, but it's certainly not addressing the full potential, or they're afraid, or they're applying AI to maybe not the right areas along the way, not the ones that are most strategically aligned. Does that resonate?
Absolutely, and I'm not. It's certainly not critical from me, because, as I say, there's different people along this spectrum, and it's not straightforward. We're not just upgrading a CRM or something here. We're talking about something very new for businesses. But I do think if I look at the last 6 months, these problems are now becoming or coming to the forefront of people's thinking. Whereas previously, 6 months ago, maybe it was, let's get ChatGPT going, let's get Copilot live, let's begin to get people au fait with the technology, whereas now people are beginning to think about the what ifs and the what nexts.
So What is Vigilant AI then doing to help customers with these issues?
We're really fortunate, and a lot of it comes from our founder's background. So Mark was previously a partner at a well-renowned strategy consulting firm, going to big banks, getting bored, super excited about AI strategies and not being able to get things from pilot to production because the lack of this provability, the guardrails that we've touched on. And Michael, our other co-founders, was most recently chief architect at Cap One, so has been in that innovative environment and previously was a director at a big four business. So has that unique blend of knowing what it takes to succeed within a regulated business to get things live, to go through digital transformation. I know I will talk about that being slightly different later on maybe, but still it was the last wave of something similar, although not the same, but also understands that consulting mindset, which I think is one of the key things to help people get through this. So Vigilant AI is, as well as a framework we'll touch on about how we encourage people to approach AI, we've created a suite that takes the burden away from busy operational and functional SMEs and enables them to build agentic solutions. So if you think of us as an agentic operating system, but what we really enable people within regulated businesses to do is build their own solutions safely. So if our solution will take people from kind of the consultant is our first onboarding for people, where you'll have a natural language interview with a consultant who will take your requirements using a framework we understand, kind of hiring intelligence, and we can touch on that in a little more detail in a moment. So we're not asking people to do something they don't understand. They understand how to say, this is the kind of person I want to hire. This is the job. This is the process they'll look at. These are the documents they'll look at. We're not asking them to understand AI. We're just asking them to understand their job, which is what they do. They're great operators. We then have our recruitment teammate, which is part of our stack. And that teammate translate those requirements into a prompt with, there's a load of technical stuff. So Neo4j, graphing, RAG memory, all of this good stuff that, frankly, is probably a little bit above my head and maybe not for the listeners on today's show, but it means that the solution that's created solves the problem and gives good outputs. We then have the teammate that does the work. Then really importantly, thinking about some of the problems flagged a moment ago, we have our supervisor layer that ensures every interaction is governed. And then finally, we have our management layer, which continually optimizes the teammate. So you think about those different challenges we highlighted a moment ago, and each of those problems we have a solution for. And by ensuring that continual optimization, we're building genuine organizational assets rather than a team, an agent or a chat assistant that's going to go out of date or leave with someone as they leave.
So I'm a team leader or a manager, and I have a need for certain resources and skill sets. And I would ordinarily, in the old world, Greg, be coming to you and saying, I need this person or this skill set or that skill set. What you're creating is a suite and a framework for that work need and for those skill sets to be defined and programmed into an AI agent that will work alongside other AI agents and people.
Absolutely. But really importantly, one thing I neglected to mention is that what's core to how we're approaching this is how it's then deployed. So we deploy it within our collaboration environment. So rather than this being a one-to-one assistant that sits and helps Jenny, this helps the whole team. So if you think about what does that look like inside our business, maybe is the easiest way to talk about this, is we have a chief of staff. So we're talking about board packs in investor work at the moment. And rather than that being a teammate that I create a load of work, I pass it on, someone then else has to review that work, read it, understand it, pass it on to the next person, you're collaboratively working together. So not only does that deliver a better outcome quicker, but to my point earlier on around adoption, you're taking people on that journey. No, certainly that's how I've experienced it being here with the guys that were miles ahead of me and I was comparatively late. I was taken on that journey with them.
So your chief of staff is an agent?
Absolutely. Teammate, but yes.
Teammate. Okay. It is a bot. It is not a person.
Yeah, agreed. But it is definitely an AI teammate, yeah.
Okay. And you've had to learn how to work and collaborate with that teammate.
Definitely. And I think one thing that we've seen as well is how do you then begin to reorganize work? I was at Money Live last week, and one of the speakers, the CEO of a bank, kind of flagged, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you said. But like, well, actually, if we're just using AI to do the same processes, we're kind of not doing things right. It's an opportunity to look at, well, actually, what are our processes? What does the future look like? And how can we do things differently? And that doesn't just apply to business operations. It'll apply to how businesses operate externally as well.
So can you give me a real life example of how that is now different for you? Like, for example, working with that chief of staff agent, give me a sort of a before and after.
Yeah, so if you think about how you might build a deck for, let's say, an investment deck, right? You'd have one person go away, do the work. God knows how long it would take, having to research, look at best practices, look at all your data. By using our internal teammate who understands our history, our background, our message, all the details about us, sat collaboratively in our channel, so working through it together, the speed to outcome is phenomenal compared to what would previously have been, I don't know, a week or maybe even more's work. You're getting that done within 24, 48 hours, as well as doing all the other things that you're doing, because we have to be those kind of people nowadays.
And that teammate is obviously learning all of your history, all of the information about your offering, people, and I suppose and your tone of voice, culture, all that, your approach. And I suppose all of that stays in the organization and doesn't leave with the person.
Exactly, and tone of voice is a really interesting one, and I, as a big one for accents, and certainly being a northerner myself, it's interesting how different people communicate, and getting that tone of voice from an AI. So my team here at the moment is the chief of staff, our sales manager, our marketing manager, our social media manager, all AI teammates, and getting that tone of voice akin to mine has been one of the things that, when we talk about our onboard, collaborate, trust, scale framework, is one of the things I've really had to work on and coach into the teammates to get it right.
Have you educated them on the best type of tea or anything like, are they Yorkshire tea fans, for example? Or
I mean, I was about to say, as much as it hurts me considering I'm on this side of the Pennines, there is only one tea, and it is Yorkshire tea.
Yeah, well, come to Dublin and I'll tell you about Barry's tea. But anyway, we won't go down that avenue. I'm beginning to understand it, Greg, but I feel like I'm still adjusting. And you said to me before, you did say that this is a mindset shift, not to think about AI as software, to think about it in the same way that you think about a human hire, which is obviously where all your experience came from. Just explain that a bit more, what that means.
Yeah, I think if we look at, and it feeds into kind of a load of different things around how we're approaching the problem holistically. But if you consider AI a piece of software, to the point we discussed earlier on about deterministic versus non-deterministic intelligence, you're going to expect an outcome straight away. You're going to expect 2 + 2 = 4. And whilst it should, it doesn't always. And just because it doesn't first time doesn't mean it's wrong or broken. You just need to coach it. So what we talk about when we're talking to customers is this mindset of onboard, collaborate, trust, then scale, rather than maybe the old digital transformation or technology way of viewing of requirements gathering, build, test to an inch of its life, then deploy, that takes, I don't know, conservatively 6 months. That we say you can approach things differently with AI. So if you consider a human, no matter if you're hiring into your team, you're onboarding intelligence through a human, and no matter if that person is the sharpest, brightest PhD student coming from, or person coming from a competitor business, you're always going to give them your policies, your procedures, your ways of doing things. You're then going to work with them to say, well, actually, this is the Jenny way of doing things, so we're going to do it slightly like this, opposed to the last way we did that you did things. And then once you've built that trust, you then give them maybe more systems access, more complex work, more work generally to do, because you've built that trust. And we'd suggest doing the same thing with AI. So it's really important that you give it your policies, your procedures, your ways of doing things. That's built into how it's created. So we spoke about our suite of teammates internal to the product earlier on. You need to work with the teammate to get some outcomes. And that's not what we're talking about here in terms of timelines, is vastly different to the IT program I kind of outlined earlier on. With one customer, they deployed, because we're the framework, we're the operating system, but it's their policies and processes, it's their teammates that really do the work. They were able to deploy the teammate within 24, 48 hours. We're working with it for 7 days. And during those 7 days, it's not lost time. They're still receiving benefit, but maybe it's only 50% of the potential benefit that can be captured. And then after 30 days, that business was able to receive, I think it was a 60, well, more than 60% time saving. It was within their complaints process, And what's really interesting as well is that a lot of the narrative is around efficiency, which is really important, but there's an effectiveness point here as well. So their QA team confirmed that the outcomes post-implementation were stronger and better than pre-implementation.
Okay, because I was going to ask you some of the kind of examples or use cases, that you've seen of this working. So what you're saying is treat it the way you would treat a new hire. Don't expect them to get everything right day one. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater if there are early mistakes. People make mistakes early days, so will a bot. Is it possible for these agents to regress? In other words, you think they've understood something, but they haven't. Have you seen any of that along the way?
Yeah, it's really interesting that, and that's why we talk about human in the loop and where actually are the benefits to be captured opposed to kind of automation versus where humans are doing deep thinking. So think about tasks that take a lot of human thought or a lot of human time. Then instead of aiming for the things that take a minute and are done 100 times a day, how about you find the thing that takes 200 minutes but it's done once a day, and you can kind of look at, well, how can we compress that? There's a lot of opportunity there. The long tail of things that digital transformation hasn't been able to touch. I think to your point around regression, it's an interesting one. So when models change or new models come out, you invariably want to move to the fastest, the best, the newest, whatever. And that's one of the most important things is the rate of change in this space is mind-boggling. And to stay on top of it is really important. And I think a key kind of almost operational risk and an operational resilience point as well for businesses is tying yourself to a single provider. An LLM provider is a really challenging one, that if you've gone down one route and someone makes a step change, how can you leverage that? So to actually answer the question you asked, the regression point, yes, absolutely. That's one of the key points there, but it just takes a bit of retraining. And that's why we always say you've got to have these controls. You've got to have the same construct we understand now about managing people, where you'll check someone's work every now and again, see how they're doing. It's the same premise.
Yeah, so hence the need for ongoing supervision, which obviously, and I guess there'll be human in the loop supervision, and there may also be agentic supervision as well over time. And
that's exactly where we are. That we have our AI supervisor layer that I referenced earlier on is our AI layer overlooking the teammates. So both at the guardrail stage, but also at the manager stage. So looking at, well, actually, how can they improve? What are the issues here? What are the challenges? What are the corrections?
So if I am, let's go back to your example of a complaints team, and I'm looking to create, what I would ordinarily do is create a complaints team of 20 people in a sort of a pyramid structure with some supervisors and so on. Would you help with this sort of org design and the optimal structure of people versus agents in that scenario?
I think it's a fascinating question. I think it's the big one for the future of work is what how do we structure teams? What does the work look like? How do we order work? So actually what sits within our platform is the ability to do that, because as I referenced earlier on, the team come from that consulting background, and their bread and butter where they spent their careers is organizational design. That is absolutely part of what the product does. We're actually working with one of our strategic partners at the moment to look at, well, what does operational excellence look like? So how can you redesign the work? How can you use our platform to do that work? And then how can you identify the areas where the benefits can be realized as well?
And perhaps, I guess, maybe a degree of risk appetite as well. You may have some sort of quite ardent adopters that will go as far as possible, and some who might want to take a little bit more of a staged approach.
I think it's the point around adoption and organizational change and design. These are the big questions, right, that we're going to see unfold over the next few years. I think there's a lot of talk about, I kind of said, take the hype with a pinch of salt a little earlier on. There's a lot of stuff in the news, but we're still talking about digital transformation, 20 years kind of on. It's the direction of travel is clear, and I wholeheartedly believe that's where we're going. But I think we need to be pragmatic with and realistic with pace and what that will be like.
Yeah, and maybe reflect all, your own organization's approach, journey, sector, ethos, values, and a whole bunch of things. Those things still count, right?
Absolutely. I love speaking to the customers where all of that matters. Like there's still a space for both. This isn't just about, well, actually what, as I say, there's this, we've seen it in the news around AI versus humans. I'm not sure that's the narrative that I think is right. That there's definitely a change coming, but I don't see it as being that.
And talk to us, Greg, about the downsides, because I feel that there's a little bit of a backlash in places here. I mean, we've got AI fatigue, we've got slop, we've got hallucinations. As customers, we've probably all had bad experiences of, rubbish bots and that kind of thing. Talk to us about upsides versus downsides and how to navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, the slop one's an interesting one, right? And I think that's definitely a frustration. I mean, I don't know. You look anywhere, social media, LinkedIn, kind of anywhere. It's clear there are a lot of people with no expertise that are purporting to be experts on the basis that it's AI generated, and there's very little value, but a lot of noise. I think how that manifests itself within organisations and work is one of the dangerous points around, big pieces of work being generated, passed on, and passed off as human work, expecting and actually creating more work for people rather than generating any efficiency. I think that's a ways of working thing where we're still, despite people rushing to the end and thinking we're nearly there, we're not. So I think this is a ways of working thing. We as a, I don't know if it sounds grand, but as a species are still working out how to work with AI, right? That we need to work it through. So I think that the impact on jobs is interesting. I think we're at a point where if you look at similar advents of technological change over the previous millennia, you'll see that there's been typically a lot of fear, but that's typically generating more work. There is a counter argument that says AI is fundamentally different. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. Personally, I'm on the side of, giving people superpowers. We're going to create more, but I don't know. I've not got the crystal ball. I don't want to be here in 6 months and someone coming up and Greg said this was the future. But yeah, I think it's an interesting one, definitely.
I think like all technologies, we'll go forward, we'll go back, we'll make mistakes, we'll learn, we'll iterate. It doesn't usually go away. And the need for us so far, we'll see, hasn't gone away. One of the questions for me, we thought technology would mean that we would all work less. And, we're still kind of waiting for that to happen. And what happens is usually we work differently. So yeah, who's to know?
The BlackBerry was so we didn't have to do as many emails in the office, right? And then what did that do? It certainly didn't make anyone's life easy. So yeah, I think there will be a change. There will be a change about how work is ordered. I think there is a change to jobs and what people do in terms of what does the day look like. But I don't think there's in the long run, I don't think there's a change in demand. I think the unique situation we're in is there's a convergence of globally a lot of different things over the last scarily 6 years. I spoke to someone I kind of really trust, and he talks about the language of permacrisis that over the last however many years, it's just been one thing after another, and it's led to a specific point. So, but it's going to be interesting to watch. I think there will be a little bit of pain in the short term.
To move from where you were to where you are now and what you're doing, I'm guessing there's been, just from a personal perspective, a huge learning curve. Do you have any reading, blogs, podcast, like what's your go-to? What would you recommend people look at and read to understand this more?
I'm really lucky because I live it. I've got no choice. It's kind of, I'm learning a language by living in the country kind of thing. So I think I read a book called Agentic Artificial Intelligence by Pascal Bornet before I joined, which gave me some really useful learnings and was rooted in real use cases. So spoke about one I remember really interestingly, thinking it was an American book. Actually, it spoke about pets at home, which are based in Greater Manchester near me. So it talked about their journey, which was really interesting. I think the challenge with books is that the pace of change is that fast. It can be hard. Like that I read that 12 months ago. I forget the date it was released. That's quite a long time in the world of AI. Mark, our co-founder, always recommends Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. I follow him on LinkedIn. Super interesting guy. Really pragmatic operating manual for how to what the future of human and AI work looks like. Podcasts, I think, are really valuable. So the Artificial Intelligence Show is really good. Me, Myself and AI is another good one. I think learning by doing. This is the future. I think there's no two ways about it. AI isn't going to go away, like you said. It makes sense for people to get involved, play, learn. I think the thing I was most fortunate with was Mike, one of our co-founders, saying just start playing like within our world that makes it super easy for me. So, I mean, put me on the outside where I'm trying to build a prompt and I'm not your guy, being frank, but I'm really fortunate that I'm enabled by Vigilant AI. But yeah, being able to play, knowing you won't break anything, create things, learn, work with it, use that framework, onboard, collaborate, trust.
And pivot from 20 years of finding people to finding agentic solutions for things. What an interesting pivot and journey you're on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I often open with customers I spent 20 years solving productivity problems with people, and now I'm doing it with AI, and kind of fundamentally it is. So it's an interesting time.
Interesting time. Fascinating. And I think something I'm going to have to reflect on and get my head around even after our conversation and beyond. But Greg Coleshill of vigilant.ai, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks, Jenny. Great to speak.
And we will put the links to all the things Greg talked about in the show notes. Thank you very much, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. For more information about the How to Be a books, the C-Suite Framework courses, the podcast, or to get in touch with me, head over to www.csuiteframework.com.